Thank you everyone for being here. This is our second table of the day. Thank you to Catherine for presenting the tables, for Miriam to having organized them and getting us together, for Kiki for doing the past table. Before I start and before I present the artists, I think it's important to have a little 3 minutes reflection of what these past 3 years of the fair have meant. And I think it's really interesting to see how in 3 years many changes and many attitudes have happened in London regarding Latin American art, whatever it means in London. And how even if you see the super mainstream galleries, White Cube, Thomas Dane, House and Grid, they're all showing Latin American artists this season, this summer in London. Same with different curated spaces. So kind of that effect that the fair has had in London that sometimes is not noticed, and I just wanted to make it a little bit visible to see that in 3 years there's been a positive change and that the fair has had this effect. I wanted to thank the artists for being here, not only here present, but for being here in the fair, and their galleries for their support to this project. I think it's one of the most interesting parts of a fair, to have the opportunity to see a complete body of work and a mini solo exhibition of each one of the artists, and that it's a really privileged situation that we're seeing these solo exhibitions that could have happened simultaneously in different cities of the world. We could have a show in New York, or yours in Santiago, yours maybe in Sao Paulo, Ecuador, yours in Rio, yours in Mexico, and to have them happen together and have this dialogue independently of identity and nationality, it's a great gift. So it's a gift of the artists and the galleries and of the fair to give the space for this to happen. What I really like about doing art sections in art fairs is that it's really like doing curating in reverse. And by this I mean that you really put things together and then later you find what happened. Sometimes when you do an exhibition, you do it the other way around. You have an idea, and you work through that idea. I hear you let things happen, and then you start to find connections between the different works. And I think the fair is a perfect place for this kind of experimentation and for this kind of laboratory to happen. I was trying to think and what would guide this table. And I thought that really what we were going to do is give each artist the opportunity to have 7 minutes to just explain a bit of their work, so you as public could understand better what they're showing in the fair, and that then we could try to think together what it means to be a Latin American artist today, in the international context, in the context of the fair, in the context of your local countries, in the context of where you live. So we could open that discussion between ourselves, but also to the table. And I was thinking also about these different perceptions of Latin American art that have been happening through the years, but also as we read it today, seeing backward, how we think about the geometric abstraction of the 50s, 60s, the more politicized conceptual work of the 70s, the multicultural discourse of difference of the 80s, the realism of crisis and of underdevelopment, but also the rise of the global international artists of the 2000s, and try to understand what being a Latin American artist in 2010 could be, and more than what does it mean to be a Latin American artist today. Maybe the real question is what is the role of the artist today? More than trying to define it by identities. Me, for a long time, I've been trying to. I've been an advocate for really that denationalization. Me myself, I've been de-Mexicanized, an advocate for that de-Latin Americanization, but also trying to find what is it then that unites us more than languages and common histories, common shared histories. And I think that beyond that, what's really important is these opportunities of being in dialogue today, of being in dialogue with each other, but also in dialogue with, let's say, the other, or sometimes a culture that hosts us in some way. So, and in this way, using the work of Manuela Ribadeneira, who is here in the fair, I really also like to think of the idea of the artist as this kind of compass, no? More than the function of the artist today could be that one that helps us orientate ourselves and find our position in the world. So maybe that's another thing that we could continue discussing. So if somebody wants to start first, and if not, we'll go with Laureana, who's sitting next to me. Laureana Toledo, she's a Mexican, an artist of Mexican origin, and she's been living in and out of, and working in and out of London for the past 5 years. And I think what's really interesting of her work is this work of wanting to understand this culture to which she arrived, but also using the tools that she brought from having been in Mexico before.
Sort of. Sort of like the work doesn't start here. I will very briefly go through it. I've been really interested in how things translate into another thing. Like I've been working with poetry that goes into painting, that later goes into video, and then goes into sculpture, and sort of like those crossovers between disciplines and artistic ways. But then at some point I just sort of like had this opportunity to do something that which was bigger and would sort of like have everything, all of these elements together. And that was one thing that I did in 2005. I had an invitation from Sheffield, some sort of art Sheffield of 5. And there was supposed to be an artwork which was destined to be viewed by a spectator, an imaginary spectator who hated art. So I decided to put a rock band, sort of like disguise the work of art as a spectacle. And I put these 4 people from 4 different bands, very important bands from Mexico, the really like big rock stars from Mexico, and I just put them together and made a cover band. And that cover band, we went to Sheffield to play, and we only played songs by bands from Sheffield, which included the Human League and Pope and the Arctic Monkeys and Def Leppard. And as a thing, as a piece of work, you would sort of like be dancing to the work of art. You would also be sort of like hearing this sort of like weird accented band. But then in the end, the fact that there's this big 4 rock stars, nobody knew about them in Sheffield, but we knew everything about Sheffield. And that's sort of like started like interesting me, that sort of way of, you know, I've been sort of like translating those things, but I haven't, until then I didn't have like that sort of like clearness on how also the cultural could be translated as well as along with the, you know, with the painting to poetry or that. And from there, you know, because we know everything about we as a periphery, which is like the forbidden word thing around. We know everything. We know every single band that comes from a tiny place in England, but nobody knows our biggest band, which is Café Tacuba, and maybe some of you know, but you know, nobody would go on the streets crazy about the bass player. And I think, well, they did their job well. They just rehearsed for 2 weeks. It came out to be a 28-minute documentary, which is like me and the camera and just, you know, basically 4 friends having fun. And then what happened, I did this book, I put all the experience together in this book, which also disguised itself as a magazine, as the Face magazine. And it's a thing, well, this book talks about my work in general and how I come up with all these strategies and ideas and those crossovers, and because they're really quite entangled, I think. And it's just, it looks like a magazine, it's a book, and it talks about the project. The central core of the project is the band. And from then I just realized that this was like sort of like our way of seeing England, like sort of like the Mexican way of seeing England, but it was done really through rock and roll, which is like something that's, I think it's one of the best weapons of English culture, is rock and roll, and how we all sort of like, at least in my generation, we knew everything through, of the outside through rock and roll. And then what I did later was, I was